All right, I'm just going to give a really quick summary of some things that we've talked about. The main purpose of these meetings have been to update you on what's happening in my own portfolio, not from the standpoint of hey, look at how wonderful this is or anything like that. It's from a teaching standpoint. It's from a learning standpoint. It's from a standpoint where I think we can all learn from deals that are going through. In August, we talked about the criteria for finding properties. So how do you look at properties? How do you start to analyze properties right at the get-go? In September, we talked really about Parkland Gardens, the Red Deer property that we're purchasing, and kind of the minimum requirements for a deal. The way we measure them is by looking at what it gives investors. That's our number one criteria. In October, we talked about cap rates and what cap rates actually mean, GRM, things like that. In November, we talked, again, I gave another real estate update, and then I talked about how to get into real estate on a smaller scale. So for example, how can you buy real estate if you don't have $500,000, you don't have $100,000? If you only have $2,000 or $3,000, can you get into real estate? We talked about how there are ways to do that. For this month, what I'd like to talk about, I will give you a portfolio update and what's happening. And there's a bunch of craziness happening. So I'd love to share that with you. And then secondly, I'd like to talk about ways to fund deals. Right now, lenders, and the update I'm going to give you today is very much about lenders. Lenders get in the way of deals more than anything right now. I'll share 25 years ago. Yeah, 25 years ago, I bought my first piece of real estate. I bought it with my brother. And at the time, you could assume a mortgage without qualifying for that mortgage. What that means is that I'll share what happened. So my dad was a real estate agent, and he came across a deal. It wasn't a great deal, but it was a deal. And he knew that I wanted to purchase a piece of real estate. And in this deal, it was a condominiumized townhouse. In this deal, he said, by the way, ask questions, feel free to comment on anything that I'm talking about here, okay? But in this deal, I think the property was $88,000. So in Calgary at the time, things were really cheap. It was in the mid 2000s, the 2003, 4, 5, 6 things went crazy, but it was before that. So we purchased this property for $88,000. That was market value at the time. But there was $20,000 of equity. In other words, there was $68,000 left on the mortgage. And I only had $10,000 at the time. So my dad lent my brother $10,000, and me, 19 years old, my brother, 17 years old, we simply took over the mortgage payments. We didn't qualify. I was 19. I'm pretty sure I didn't even have credit at the time, okay? I'm pretty sure I didn't have a credit card or anything like that. We simply took over the payments of the mortgage. And the bank was fine with it. And the owners sold us the property, and we started making the payments and rented it out. That's as easy as it was to do real estate over 20 years ago. Now, there have been significant changes in the market. I'm going to give you an idea of commercial deals as well. So commercial real estate, by commercial, I mean like office buildings, retail buildings, industrial warehouse spaces, that kind of thing. At the time, 20, 25 years ago, what you could do is you could find an empty building. Okay, so you've got an empty building here, and you buy it at empty building price. So you get a really good deal on the building. Then you could fill the building. Okay, you find a tenant for the building, and then you could go to the bank and say, this building is filled. This is before you've even purchased. This is in the process of purchasing the building. This building is filled. It's making this much money. It is worth, let's say, just to use simple number, it's worth $1 million. I bought it for $300,000 or $500,000, but it's worth $1 million. I would like a loan on the $1 million valuation, the appraisal. And the banks were happy to do that. The banks would say, great, we do 75% loan to value, so we will give you $750,000 and then you need $250,000 in equity in the building, which you had at the $1 million valuation. So you could buy it for $500,000 and get paid $250,000 to purchase the building because you've tenanted it. Legitimately, you have a building for free. a little bit of time and energy, a lot of time and energy, right? Finding a tenant, but you've got lots of time and energy into it. They give you $250,000 at the end of the day. You've made $250,000 and you have a building. You could do that 20 years ago. You are not able to do that right now. Banks and lenders are getting more and more stringent. Canada actually has some of the most stringent banks in the Western world and in similar banking systems. The US banking system has always been fairly loose. You can get a lot of things done. One difference between the US and Canada right now is that in the US, you can lock in a rate for 40 years. You can have a 40-year amortization and lock in a rate at 3%, from 4%, whatever it is, okay? That's amazing. And this is why. The world is going through a massive transition right now. My belief, I don't know if this is true or not. Anyone who says they do know it's true, strike them off as either a charlatan or somebody who's lying to themselves, or yeah, they're trying to get paid for it, okay? But my belief is that, well, let me check right now. I'm going to do I'll give you guys an update, okay? Inflation rates have been going through the roof, okay? So the government loves inflation at about 2.5% inflation. I'll do even specifically in Canada, okay? So I'm typing this in. So inflation rates, official inflation rates in Canada are over 4.5%. Let me give you the year-on-year increases in inflation this year. In January, it was 1%. By April, it was 3.5%. By October, November, it's 4.5%. What that means is that our money is eroding. Our money is eroding. The government, the last 10 years of printing money, 12 years of printing money, is starting to catch up to the world. Now, of course, COVID is helping this situation and other things. But what happens with inflation? Well, yes, the value of the dollar goes down. Governments, it's great for governments because they have so much debt. They're printing lots of money and they can pay off the debt with less valuable dollars. Okay, so in other words, if you said, Mark, and this is actually why I like real estate. If you said, Mark, I will give you $100,000, you can buy a house with that, and you pay me within the next 10 years. Well, if I wait 10 years, that $100 is now worth only $70 of buying power. I can pay back that mortgage with 70 bucks instead of 100 bucks. That's a great deal. And this is what governments are doing. Now, the way economics generally works is that if inflation starts going too high, people start panicking, the market goes a little bit nuts. Other countries start going, do we want to deal with Canada? Do we want to deal with Canadian dollars? And the way generally governments combat that is by raising interest rates. When you raise interest rates, people start spending less money, okay? People start borrowing less money, they start spending less money, and it just kind of cools down the system. That's the general thought with economics, okay? Now, the problem in North America right now, the problem in the Western world and really all over the world is that because people have so much debt, if the government raises interest rates, the market crashes and things go into another kind of chaos. So the government's stuck between two hard places right now. There's the chaos of inflation and there's the chaos of debt. And because governments haven't let markets kind of play out, because for the last 20, 30 years, they've tried to really control markets more and more and more. It kicks the can down the road. I'll give you an analogy, okay? It's kind of like forest fires. I live in Alberta. In BC, there are forest fires every year. And you know what? Forest fires are a part of the natural environment. Lightning strikes, there are forest fires. It's not simply all human-made. And what happens with forest fires, I'm not saying that forest fires are good. I'm just saying that they exist, okay? What happens with forest fire is forest fires naturally clean out all this undergrowth that has been building up. So forest fire burns itself out, it replenishes the soil with a bunch of nitrogen, and there's new growth. There's something called fireweed that you see all over in Alberta where there's been a forest fire, and it replenishes the earth, there's a lot of better growth, a lot more nutrients in the soil, and there's new growth that comes up. So it's a cycle. It's a normal cycle. What governments in Alberta and BC often do is they try to clear out undergrowth. They try to stop forest fires. What happens is it actually kicks the can down the road. And instead of having small forest fires that just burn up small amounts of land, we now have massive forest fires because we don't allow the natural process to take place. In a similar way, in my opinion, with the governments and the economies, we are kicking the can down the road. We're not letting small problems happen. We're saving banks, we're saving companies, we're saving, and it has nothing to do with me, it has to do with the governments, because they think something awful will happen. Well, guess what? Instead of having one small awful thing happening or lots of small awful things happening, we're kicking the can down the road to have massive awful things happening. I'll give you an example. In 2018, the US government tried to raise interest rates by just a little bit. And the stock market started crashing. The stock market started dipping, and it freaked the government out. And so they lowered interest rates again. So what do you do if you're a government and inflation is kicking up and at an extreme right now? This is considered extreme, like close, starting to get to, wait a second, is this going to be like the 1970s? By the way, in the 1970s, for those of you who remember, I don't specifically remember, I was born in 78, but in 1970s, the interest rates were massive. Mortgages. I've got uncles and aunts who on their farmland had to borrow money at 24% interest from a bank. For mortgages, you paid 19, 20% interest for a mortgage. And so there's some fear that that's going to happen. Well, coming back down to the deals that we are doing right now, I am potentially increasing my portfolio size by about $8 million within the next 4 to 6 weeks. That's kind of the hope, the plan. Okay. Banks are getting in the way of this. Banks are getting extremely stringent. When I borrow money from a bank, they ask every personal question. This is different than the US. Canadian banks ask incredibly personal questions. They ask you what your I'm not trying to be crude here, but like they'll ask me what my sperm count was for the last year, and they'll ask me what incredibly intrusive questions. I'm exaggerating, and it actually scares off a lot of investors. So people, and I've heard that this is because in Toronto and Vancouver the markets are crazy, so the government's trying to just kind of tone down the markets and slow some of the purchasing. My opinion is that more government intervention generally doesn't help the market long-term because the thinking is short-term. The fixes aren't long-term, they're short-term. As an example, you introduce a new species I heard that rabbits were introduced to Australia and completely took over. Okay, because they don't have a natural predator that takes care of them. And in similar ways, sometimes we think short term and go, oh, this will be a fix. Not because we've got bad intentions or the government has bad intentions. I don't think they're extremely intelligent about it, but I don't think they're trying to hurt people. But they institute something, it doesn't work again, and things fall through. So with this right now, it is very difficult to borrow money. It's extremely difficult to borrow money. In the last 3 months, I've been given probably the equivalent of about a master's degree crash course on lending and how to gain lending, because we've had some problems gaining lending on one of the buildings because it was empty. Even though there was payments for the next year, even though a lot of things were happening, 10 years ago it would have been fine. 20 years ago, there would have been a steal. It would have been super easy. Now it's very difficult. So let's go into ways that you can fund a deal, ways that you can fund a deal. So the most natural way, the way that most people think of real estate is you fund a deal. We'll start with single family homes through a CMHC mortgage, backed mortgage. So CMHC, the Canadian Mortgage and Housing Corporation, is an insurance company that insures mortgages to help homeowners get into properties. So you can put 5% down on a property. CMHC will insure the mortgage for the lender, and the lender is willing to give 90% loan to value. So that's one main way. In a second, I'm going to get you guys to brainstorm other ways, more creative ways, okay? But the more normal way of getting a mortgage is usually 75 to 80% loan to value. And most lenders, whether it is one of the big 5 banks in Canada, or whether it's First National on commercial loans, that's the biggest bank on commercial side, that's not the big 5, or it is like community banks, you can go to credit unions or whatever. All of these banks typically about 75 to 80% loan to value. That's what they're looking for. They're looking that you want 20 to 25% equity in a property or down payment on a property in order to make it safe for them. So other than that, other than kind of conventional financing or CMHC financing, what are some other ways to fund a deal? I want you to throw some things out. You can put it in the chat. You can put it in the Q&A box. Feel free. I'm just going to open all these tabs so that I can respond with people to what people are saying. Okay, so Sam, you said private lending, and absolutely. So a really quick definition of private lending: you can go to somebody, anybody, and say, hey, would you be willing to lend me some money? I'm going to purchase a property. And it's their choice. They can say yes or no. Now, the way private lending generally works is that they will ask a lot of questions. People who do private lending are typically very savvy. They've made their money in real estate, or they've made their money in business. They've got money and they understand how money works. And now, instead of paying the 2% you'll pay for a home mortgage, a single family home mortgage, or the 3 or 4% that you'll pay for conventional financing with an apartment building or some other kind of large building, now you can get up quite high. With private lending, I would say there are kind of 2 versions of this. There's registered funds, so RSPs and TFSAs and things like that. And then there's just the wealthy individual who says, yeah, I'll lend my money on something. Usually you need a high amount of equity in the building. So usually they'll even go lower. They won't give you 80%, 90% loan to value. Typically they'll give you usually 65% loan to value. But with some private lenders, they will go higher. The higher they go, the more money you need to pay in interest. Okay, so you can easily pay 10, 12, 14, 15% in order to borrow that money. Now, if this was the 1970s, you'd been like 15%, that's a great deal. In these days, that's not typically something that we get really excited, right? VTB, so a couple people have said VTB, vendor take back financing. This is where the seller, the person who owns the building, doesn't have a lot of debt on the building. Let's say they own it 100%. There's no debt on the title. They don't owe anybody money for this. They own it completely. And you can go to them and say, hey, listen, do you want to hold some of the financing? And you know what? Depending on what their goals are, they can hold some of the financing. The general thought is if they don't want to pull all their money out of the building, if they just want to pull a little bit out to save some taxes here and there, then that's an opportunity for them. Sometimes they don't know what to do with their money. Sometimes they like you and they're willing to work with you. Sam said JV, so a joint venture partner. A joint venture partner is now somebody who maybe you're the brains of running the real estate and they're the money. So you join together. It's a partnership. Somebody brings the money, somebody brings the work and the expertise, and you work together. So somebody qualifies for the mortgage and pays for that mortgage, and the other person works the deal, manages the deal, fills it with tenants, does whatever they need to. Good. So these are the most common other ways to do this. What else? What else can you guys think of? Limited partnerships. Lana, yes, absolutely. Sorry, you said that to me individually. Usually I only say it if everyone was involved there. But yeah, limited partnership. So an LP, a limited partnership, is now a more structured agreement. So you've got to go through more hoops. With a joint venture partner or a VTB or private lender, I don't need to necessarily even qualify. I can just say to somebody, hey, will you give me money? And they'll say, yeah, I'll give you money. With a limited partnership, you cannot do this. That's how Gwen and I run our deals. And limited partnerships, you've got to jump through a bunch of hoops. You've got to register a bunch of things with the province. And then you've got to go through a very long document with every investor that you have that tells them, danger, danger, warning. Wonder if I've got one. I don't have one. I was just signing one with somebody a week ago. So it says warning, danger, many, many times in the document. You could lose everything. It's making sure the government is trying to make sure, and the Securities Commission is trying to make sure that investors know what they're getting into, so that you're not taking advantage of people. The only people able to invest in a limited partnership, there are only two groups of people. The first group of people is people who are accredited investors, people who earn a lot of money every year, or they've got they're a very large net worth. And so they're assumed they understand money more. And if they lose it, it's not going to destroy them. Or secondly, it could be friends or family members. And I'm talking close friends or family members of the person who is doing the deal. Okay. So I can have my mom and dad invest in a deal, or my brother or sister, or I could have somebody who's an accredited investor. It says warning, warning, warning all over there. If the Securities Commission caught wind that I was trying to offer investments, limited partnerships to somebody who was only investing maybe $50,000 and they didn't know me very well, or I didn't know them very well, they will shut me down. We will lose our real estate. Everything will be locked up for a long time. This is something that I never want to experience. I never want to cross this line. Okay, we are very careful with our limited partners that they check off the boxes. So those are limited partnerships. Excellent. Now, I talked last month about how you can get in with a REIT. Now, there are people called exempt market dealers, EMDs. And these people are people who vet deals. They look at deals. But in order to have a deal, so if Gwen and I wanted to open it up to strangers that we don't know and have investments, we need what's called an OM, an offering memorandum. This costs a lot of money. And we typically don't want to do this kind of deal unless we have a very large deal because of how much money it costs to put together. There's not enough money in the deal. If you spend $50,000, $60,000 in lawyers' fees, that it's too much now to recover from a deal. So unless it's a deal that's about $8-10 million minimum, typically we're not going to do an OM, put together an OM. But with an OM, you can now take money from anybody, and you can take any kind of money. So now I can go to an exempt market dealer and say, hey, listen, sell my product. And they can sell this deal to people that have as little as $2,000 or $3,000 to invest, like I talked about last month. So this is actually a really good thing for a lot of people. The problem is now that there's more separation, and there's less money in the deal usually because of all the costs involved of doing this. Okay, but now RSP money, people can take RSP money, people can take TFSA money. It's very easy, much easier to get the money now. Okay, I'll throw out another thing, and that is agreements for sale or lease option deals. So if you don't know about these, I'll give you a really quick explanation. Please research these. I'm not going to get into them crazy amounts today, but they're things that everyone needs to know, because this is not something that you just apply to real estate. This is something you can apply to all business. An agreement for sale is basically an agreement to buy the property, an agreement for sale. It's very simple from the name. I can go to somebody who wants to sell their property and say, listen, I don't have the money to buy it right now. Or I want to do some repairs on it first so I can bring it up to snuff, or whatever. Maybe they say we want $200,000 for it, and I don't want to pay $200,000 for it right now. It's not worth it. But I could say, okay, listen, if you allow me to buy it in 2 or 3 years for $200,000, then I can give it to you, because I have the chance to build more equity in the bill. Sorry, more cash flow in the building. I can upgrade it. I can bring better tenants into it. I can do things like that. With an agreement for sale, I pay money. It's like a down payment. I pay money to put this contract in place, and now the agreement is to sell it in however long. Usually with these, I've got an ability to rehab the property. I've got an ability to do some of these things, but an agreement for sale doesn't necessarily allow me to do that. The owner could say, no, don't change it at all. That's putting me at risk because you haven't bought it yet. Okay, but you control it. Another unique way to do this, very similar to an agreement for sale, is a lease option agreement. A lease option agreement has two agreements. The first contract is a lease contract, or the first one I should say is an option contract, and the second one is a lease contract. So the lease is just a lease. I'm paying you rent to have this property. Or to use this property. And the first one, that option agreement, is like you buy a ticket. a coupon that gives you the right to buy the property within the next 2 or 3 or 5 or 10 years. You can set the date no matter what it is. But you've got a right to buy the property within this space of time for a certain amount of money. So I could buy it tomorrow if I want, or I could wait until the last day to exercise this option. Now, what's the difference? In both situations, you're controlling the property for an extended period of time. In both situations, you're not paying all the money up front. In both situations, it looks like kind of a down payment. With an agreement for sale, that money goes towards the future sale of the property, or the future purchase of the property. So your money goes towards the purchase. With an option, the option money, it looks the same, maybe it's the same amount, but it doesn't go to purchase the property usually. It can, it usually doesn't. Usually it's the price to buy that piece of paper, that legal document that says you can buy it within the next 2 years. In both situations, you control the property, but an agreement for sale, you can control it more. You control it a little bit more. With a lease option agreement, you control it a little bit less. But those are great options for situations where you go, hey, I can pay you more for it later, but I can't pay you that for it now. Or give me time to fix it. Or give me time to fill it with better tenants. Give me time to bring the revenue up higher. Those are ways that you can do those deals. Again, very common to do these deals, as well as a VTB, a vendor take-back financing or a vendor finance deal. That's very common in the business world all over the place. Another situation, and this is where I've learned a lot in the last few months, credit unions are a gold mine. Credit unions are a gold mine if you want to get into real estate, bigger real estate, usually not single family homes, but bigger real estate, commercial real estate, businesses that you're buying, because credit unions don't have the same advertising dollars as TD or whatever, Bank of Montreal. Because they don't have the ability to advertise themselves or market themselves, people don't normally go to credit unions. Credit unions are fantastic to deal with. I love dealing with credit unions. And I'd highly recommend that if you're struggling to find money for a deal, you start looking and talking to credit unions. Now, usually they won't lend out of province. So for example, a big credit union in Alberta is called Service, SERVUS. And they will lend for things in Alberta, but they're hesitant to lend to anything out of Alberta, unless you're already a member for a while. Or I'm buying the Moose Jaw property, that the Saskatchewan credit unions will typically only lend to properties in Saskatchewan. Sometimes they're hesitant to lend to me because my business is set up in Alberta. Credit unions typically support the communities that they're in. They're very community oriented. So they're fantastic to deal with. Again, usually the relationship with the bank is fantastic compared to a major 5 bank where you don't know the manager of the bank and they don't care about you, and you know they don't care about you. And if you do have a conversation with them, it might be a different manager the next time. With a credit union, you get to know these people in the credit union. Another option, this is something that I don't know if anyone knows about this. After I mention it, if anyone says, yes, I knew about that, I'm going to be very impressed with you, okay? Because this is a very, very little known thing that I found out over the last 3 months. And that is the Business Development Bank of Canada, the BDC. The BDC is a government-run body that wants to support business. Now, it's not supposed to compete with banks. It's not supposed to put banks outside of business. Here's the problem. The BDC will not lend. It's not into mortgages. The BDC doesn't really deal with mortgages. It's a weird thing for the BDC. They will not lend on residential properties. They will not lend on apartment buildings. They won't work with you. But on commercial real estate, they will. Not only that, they will give sometimes a very high loan to value. With the Moose Jaw property that we're working on right now, we are hoping to get a BDC loan. We're working with them right now to get a BDC loan at 85% loan to value. 85% loan to value. Not only that, but we are going to be doing some construction in that building, $600,000 of construction, it looks like, or around that. And they will give a construction loan of that $600,000. So not only are they allowing us to go 85% loan to value on the purchase, but they're allowing us to go 85% loan to value on the building construction. That is massive for us because now we have less money needed for the deal, which means that we are paying off equity. We've got lots of ways to make money in this deal that can be phenomenal. Okay, so Greg, you knew about this. That's fantastic. Again, BDC will not loan on apartment buildings or single family homes, but they're in business. So if you buy a commercial property that is for business purposes, now they're open to it. Really unique opportunity. I would highly suggest you do a little bit of research if you want to get into commercial real estate, because this is a really unique opportunity. Sam, I'm thinking about you right now as somebody who, you're getting into this more and more. To be able to offer this to your clients, I think is really unique. And you can have, again, a relationship with the BDC. Just know the BDC in your local area or where you're selling your real estate. And there will be a specific person dedicated to commercial loans in that area with real estate. So very interesting, a unique way. I want to say just two more things. Again, I'm going to give you a really quick update on the real estate projects. And then secondly, I would love to encourage you in what kind of projects you pursue. In the real estate world, and maybe I'll take the second one first. In the real estate world, there's a lot of marketing telling people, get into lease option deals, get into VTBs, agreements for sale. They're marketing all of these creative, unique ways to do real estate. This is my quick opinion on this. None of these ways should make the lion's share of your real estate purchases. The lion's share of your real estate purchase should be done more in conventional type financing. Why? Because there are more deals that are available. You're going to get way more done. But we should know VTBs, we should know agreements for sale, we should know lease options, we should know vendor take-back financing or joint venture partnerships or whatever else there is. And when we know it's out there, when we come across a deal and we ask the seller questions, we can quickly ascertain, hey, this other strategy might fit, because those other strategies can be fantastic. They can be phenomenal. The best deals in real estate often utilize one of those strategies. It's simply that they don't come across every day. And I've seen a lot of coaches kind of go, yeah, just do agreements for sale or just do lease options. And typically, I'm going to make a broad generalization. Generally, the students that I've had or the clients that I've had or the people I know that have tried only one strategy like that, typically don't find very many deals. They really struggle. Many of them give up. And even the ones who push through tend to make mistakes because they're only focusing on one type of deal. So here's my recommendation in real estate. Focus on normal bread and butter deals. Don't look for only the home runs. Look for the single base hits, okay? The on base hits. Just get onto base. Just start your real estate portfolio. Get into it. As you begin your real estate portfolio and you grow in it, now, yes, when you come across crazy deals, take them down. When you come across potential crazy deals, you can work with them. Consistently develop, become a master of this, understand every way you can do a deal. Start with things that are less expensive and then move towards things that are more expensive, like the private lending, if the deal is there and it's worthwhile. Okay, quick update with my portfolio here. The 55 unit building in Red Deer, it's called Parkland Gardens. We were trying to close on December the 8th. The bank got in the way. So the lender has had more than 5 months to look over all the documents, to do everything they need to do. But lenders don't do that. What lenders do is they will make sure you are qualified. And then in the last week before lending, they will do their paperwork. They ran into something that is not a problem, but they identified as a potential problem. We'd done everything we needed to do. Our lawyers had done everything they needed to do. But then they said, we are going to delay this. No problem. I mean, our original close date was January the 15th. Anyway, we were just trying to help out the vendor, the seller, by doing it a little bit earlier. So that deal, I was getting excited about all the property management, but that will be pushed probably to mid to late January, okay? That's what's happening with the 55 unit building. I'm really excited about the property management with that. I live in Calgary. I'm not far. It's an hour and a half drive, but I'm going to be actively managing that property to put in systems that work for us long-term. We can save so much more money if everything is vertically integrated in our company and we are running all these systems ourselves. and then handing them off to qualified employees. So that's that deal. The Moose Jaw deal, we are waiting. We are waiting on a bunch of stuff. So we want to close as soon as we can. In order to close, we need financing. In order to get financing, we need a tenant, because that's what gives security to the lender. In order to get a tenant, right now the tenant we're working with is somebody who we're looking into these construction loans and how much it's going to cost. So we need a lease in place with that tenant. We believe we're a week or two away of signing things with the tenant. Once we do that, this tenant, it's getting better for us right now. This tenant is willing to sign a 20-year lease with us. Think about this in context right now. 20-year lease. It's a medical tenant. So we have phenomenal security. There's nothing 100% guaranteed, but a medical tenant is going to be far more secure than almost any other tenant. There's government tenants as the top security because we pay for the government services. We pay taxes. They're backed by the taxes. And then the second most reliable tenant is medical tenants, our medical clients. So with that, we're hoping to sign a 20-year lease. The first 10 years, we get a certain amount of payments. And then at year 10, the price per square foot in that building jumps by $5. That is massive. It's increasing our net income by, or our gross income by about 30% or so, which is huge. So they're paying us a ton of money in the interim. At 10 years, they pay us a bunch more money. It pushes the value of the building. The building is going to be worth more when we purchase it than what we purchased it for, which is excellent. It forces the valuation of that. And everything seems to be really good there. A deal is not done. This is what I've learned in real estate. A deal is not done until it's done. Doesn't matter whether it's the last day and everyone is committed to do it. It doesn't matter whether the bank's committed to do it. It doesn't matter whether the lawyers commit to do it. Until the deal is done, it's not done. And this is a really good business lesson as well for those of you who are getting into different businesses right now. Don't count the chickens before they hatch, legitimately, because half of those chickens may not hatch. 3/4 of them might not hatch. And this is the beauty of real estate. Real estate, getting into big real estate, pushes out everyone who is not really dedicated to it, who does not have a skill set to take care of it. Those people get weeded out. And in the end, what happens is only the people who are really persistent and really have the great skill sets get real estate deals done. So in some ways, I'm frustrated with lawyers and banks right now. In other ways, I go, I'm so pig-headed, I'm so thick-skulled that I'm willing to do these deals, which means there are more deals for people like me, which is excellent. I've gone over time here a little bit. Enjoy your weekend. I specifically wish you a happy holiday season, whatever that means for you, whatever traditions you have. We've got our own crazy traditions. One of those traditions is something that I'm going to right now. I've promised the next few hours with my kids before I've got some more business to do. So I'm going to head off there. Enjoy the season, enjoy the holidays, enjoy time off if you have it, and enjoy work if you have it. Whatever you find yourself in, find a way to enjoy it. We'll talk to you guys later. See ya.